Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Managing Your Farm Dam Water Supply in Dry Seasonal Conditions. My name is Brad Costin and I'm from Agriculture Victoria. And so with many areas of Victoria experiencing a series of dry seasons and with summer fast approaching, Greg Bekker from Agriculture Victoria will today be discussing on-farm dam water issues and strategies to manage your livestock water supply. And so with many parts of Victoria experiencing low rainfall and minimal runoff into dams, now's a good time to assess your situation and develop key strategic decisions to manage your livestock water supply. So today, Greg will discuss how much water you need, how much water do you have, setting trigger points for critical decision making and short-term options and long-term planning. Greg Bekker is a Land Management Extension Officer with over 30 years experience in agriculture, and Greg has dairy farmed and managed a wide range of large-scale dryland livestock farming businesses. And with a focus on farm planning, water management and farming systems, his experience is diverse. So today, Greg shall present the webinar for about 45 minutes, and then we shall open up for a question and answer session at the end. Feel free to send any questions throughout the presentation by typing them in the message panel on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. And we will then answer them at the end of the presentation just to make good use of time. And for those on the phone, they can press star 1 to ask a question at the end of the presentation. At the end of the webinar, there will also be a short survey, so please stay online for the survey because your responses will help us continue to offer services such as this. Also, this webinar will be recorded and the link of the recording sent to participants. So we'll also have an operator online to help with question time and any troubleshooting we need during the webinar. And so now I'll hand over to Greg to continue with the presentation. Over to you, Greg.
Thanks very much, Brad. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along on a bright sunny day here at Broadford. We're going to be talking today about have you got enough water for your livestock through the summer? And I guess this has come about with very little runoff into lots of catchment dams. And we want to try and get ahead of the game. So one of the critical things we need to do is we've got to measure and we've got to know. If we can do those things and measure and know, then we're making informed decisions rather than guessing. So the current situation, we've had very little or no runoff for lots of parts of the states, and I know in Gippsland they haven't had any runoff there for 2 years. We can all hope that we get a big rainfall event and the dams get filled, but that's hoping. And the other thing to consider is once you get down to low levels of water in your dam, less than 0.5 of a metre, things start to become very problematic. You get getting stuck in them, lots of turbidity, lots of mud, lots of faeces and urine in the water, so not the best quality water. And then you can start getting animal health issues and more likely to get blue-green algae and all of those other impacts. The other thing to think about is that rainfall is one of the factors that means we haven't got runoff, but things have changed a little bit. Lots of us are growing more grass. We've improved our pastures, so we've got different species in there. We've increased the soil fertility, and if we're growing more grass, that means they're using more water, and we're not getting anywhere near the same amount of runoff off our paddocks into our dams. Remembering a lot of these systems and dams and all those things were designed and built of quite a long time ago. And as we know, things are changing, and that's what we're about here, is looking at what these changes and how that impacts on your farming business. Today I'll be talking about how to actually estimate your water requirements, how to do a water budget, how to measure your dams, water use efficiency options, some short-term ones, just some ideas and thoughts on what are the trigger points. And when I say trigger points, what I'm trying to get people to do is think about when this situation happens, when we get to this point in time, that means I need to do something. And I guess doing nothing is not an option when it comes to water for your stock, because as farmers and people who are in charge and managing stock, it's your responsibility to make sure that they've got good, clean drinking water. And then just touch on some long-term planning so that people can start thinking about not being in the same situation the next dry spell. And a part of that is the time to collect and harvest enough water is when it's raining. It's virtually impossible to do it now. So there is no magic bullets. What do we need for water on your property? No surprise, we use it in your house, and if you run out, you can get the tank and buy water in. We need it for your garden, and people get surprised about how much water their garden actually uses. We need it for the environment, so there's lots of things there that require water. Firefighting is a big issue in some areas, and how much water do you actually want for firefighting? Some council have requirements. What we're going to concentrate on is how much water you need for your animals. So the farm water budget looks at the farm water supply, and if you're lucky enough, you've got groundwater springs and creeks and those sort of things, you wouldn't be in on this teleconference or webinar. So we're going to concentrate on catchment runoff dams and mainly you're catching water off your roof area. So that means it's stored, and really we either store it in a dam and or we store it in a rainwater tank. Okay, but once again, it still needs to rain for that to fill up. And with the water uses, stock, gardens, and one here that a lot of people forget about, and I'm highlighting there with the red dot, is evaporation. Okay, it's our second biggest user after the animals in our house. So when we're looking at our stock water requirements, the things we need to think about and what influence it is the type of animal, and whether we've got sheep or cattle or other types of animals, the size of those animals, the age of the animals, the condition, are they in good condition, poor condition, and the status of them. So if they're pregnant or they're feeding calves or lambs, they're going to be using a lot more water than if they're dry. The other consideration is their diet. So are they being fed dry hay? Are they being fed grain? Are they on lush pastures? All of those things have a big influence on the amount of water that they use. The level of activity, are they walking around a paddock trying to find feed? All of those things, and this tends to go in tandem with less feed. That's why we've got the dry conditions. However, I am doing some work and have heard of people that have got feed in the paddock but no water in the dams. That tends to be unusual. The other thing is the quality of the water on offer. As the water level decreases, the turbidity of it, the salinity of it, all of those things can increase, which means it's a poorer quality. And then the other one is, do the animals have access to shade? We'd all like to go and stand under a tree in a 40-degree day. So here's a graph that shows just some typical consumption in litres per day of animals, and you can have lots of debates about the amount of litres that sheep or cattle do drink. This is an indicator to give people a starting point when they're starting to do some calculations. Okay, so for a beef cow, up to 100 litres. I'm an ex-dairy farmer, and I know a lactating dairy cow will drink 140 litres in the middle in a hot summer's day. It's a fair bit of water, especially when you've got to cart it in a bucket. Here's a little Excel spreadsheet that I've done up, and lots of farmers can do this if they like. It does all the maths in the background. You can put the numbers in to work out how much water you're going to need. What I'm suggesting is we need to do the calculation from now, November, through till May, when hopefully we get a good autumn break and things start to improve and dams start to fill. And you can see there that just by doing this, and this is on a 100 cow beef farm, okay, running a few replacement heifers or steers and a few bulls, that it's the figure there is 1.9 megalitres of water, 1,900,000 litres of water, nearly 2 megs of water. Okay, that's how much water needs to go down the animal's throat. That's how much they're going to drink. And if I had that amount of water in a rainwater tank or a big tank that I wasn't going to lose any evaporation, I would be getting through. That may not be the case for lots of people because you'll have your water in dams. One of our things that AgVic offer, we have an on-farm water calculator. If you want to go through this process and all the maths is taken out for you and you just need to put the figures in, you go to Google and type in on-farm water calculator. That will bring you to, sorry I went too fast, that page there, which is the farm water calculator. And there is a set of toggles across the top, home, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will do all the calculations for you. Okay, that's available. There's the first one, and you type in your area. It works out evaporation and whether you're north or south of the divide, all of those types of things. It can also put the type of livestock and then subcategories, whether they're lactating or dry, and the number, and it works out those figures for you. There will be a question later on in this webinar as to whether people actually want a hand to do that, and happy to discuss those with you. While talking about that, no two farms are the same. So while this discussion and webinar is general information, my contact details will be at the end, and I'm more than happy to have a phone discussion with people pertaining to their individual results and instances, and even just checking up on the maths. I mentioned before evaporation. It's one of our biggest losses after the stock use, and what we know is shallow dams with large surface areas suffer from very high evaporation losses, and they vary across the state. And obviously north of the divide, it tends to be quite a lot hotter than south of the divide. And the figure I use north of the divide is that we lose about 1 metre of water to evaporation per year. These graphs here just depict that. Up the side here we've got millimetres, 300 at the top, and then the months of the year, January, February, going across the bottom axis here. And you can see here that January, February, or we're in November, December, January, February, we're losing 250 to 200 mil per month. So when you do the maths there, and it sort of adds up to 950 mil that we're going to lose between now and the end of March. Significant. So just when we think that we've got enough water in the dam and we think we're going to get through, maybe that's going to be the critical factor for you, and that might be the thing that in the middle of January you run out. Some just calculations and volumes for people is a megalitre is 1 million litres of water, which is roughly the size of an Olympic swimming pool. Okay, a cubic metre, which is 1 metre by 1 metre by 1 metre, and a lot of people will see those 1,000 plastic tanks around. That's a cubic metre. And the other interesting one is that a metre squared, so a metre squared of roof area on your house, shed, dairy, whatever it is, will yield you 1 litre of water for 1 millimetre of rain. Now, the first couple of mil is evaporation and cooling the tin down and all those sort of things, but that's an approximate rule of thumb. Okay, the other one is seepage, and all dams leak. None of them don't, I guess, except for probably the plastic-lined ones, but they all have some sort of leakage and or evaporation. This is just a little example here, and what I'm trying to do is highlight, there's a formula applied there, that this is a 30 metre by 35 metre by 3.5 metre deep dam. A lot of people would be pretty happy if they had that at this time. Applying those calculations and those figures, that's the amount of water that's lost per day, 8,174. And if you equate that back, it's about 100 cows per day would drink. So substantial. Okay, so how much water do you have? And we're going to be looking at the dams and the storage tanks. Okay, if people are now trying to look at bores or putting bores in and they're ringing a drilling contractor, probably too late and they'll be all booked up. And doing those sorts of things, you're probably too late. Okay. One of the things I encourage people to do is make sure that any of your hard surfaces, rains, shearing sheds, anything like that, is plumbed into as large a tank as you can possibly afford, because that's all water that should be going and should be being used. Here's just a couple of photos of things that have happened. So that's just a 6 metre by 8 metre shed with a 100,000 litre tank on it, and surprisingly how quickly that 100,000 litre tank filled up. Here's another one on a new shearing shed. That's a 200,000 litre tank, and the same thing. The cost of water, of storing water per litre, is just coming down all the time. Okay, so what we're going to work through is what size are your dams, and lots of people don't know this. And what we're going to be trying to focus on here is the amount of water you actually have in there at this point in time. There's two. There's the size of your dam when it's at full capacity, and there's how much water's in it at the moment. Okay. What we need to do is we need to know the width of it, we need to know the length of it, and we need to know the depth. Okay. And sitting in your office or your lounge room and guessing it is not how we measure this. Okay. Ideally, we need to get out there with a tape measure, or second best, at least step it out and know that your steps are approximately to a metre. Okay. As I said in the opening introduction, if we don't measure, we don't know. Determining the depth of the dam can be a little bit challenging. Happy to help people and have discussions with them with some of the options, and not always the best one to get in your swimmers and go wading out into the mud and those sorts of things. But there are some other things available to help with the depth. So the first thing we're going to do is calculate the surface area. That's in square metres, and then we apply this formula, which is the volume. The 0.4 is the factor we add in. Most dams have been built with a 1 to 3 gradient on them, and that's what they are for stock to gain access to them, and then so we multiply that by the surface area by the depth. Okay. We then calculate the capacity of each dam in megalitres, dividing it by 1,000. Okay, and you can add up all of those individual ones to give you your total water capacity. The challenge there is you might have 3 or 4 dams and do these calculations and say, I've got enough water, but those 3 or 4 dams are all going to lose half a metre to a metre in evaporation over the next 4 months, and that's where the challenge for some of us. Okay, here's some examples. So here's an oval dam, and you can see that it's not full, and what we need to do is we need to measure from where the water is. So you can see on here where my the red dot is, the blue line going across, the width and the length, and then we need to either know or estimate what the depth is. Here's a square dam, same thing, measure the length and the width. These ones are a little bit more challenging, as in the gully or triangle dams. Once again, we're measuring the water where the water actually is, not where it could be or when it's at full capacity. And we divide that by 2 because these are in a triangle for the surface area. And there's a rectangle one, and that would be a dam that wouldn't have too much seepage losses. So what I've done there is applied some typical figures of dams that I've seen around the area and with farmers that I've worked with. 10 metres by 12 metres, for example, 1. 12 metres by 20 metres, for example, 2. The gully dam, 18 metres by 20. That one there I've actually measured, and I know it's only 0.5 of a metre. And then the big rectangle dam to give us the amount of water that we have available. Okay. The depth of the dams plays a critical role in how much water we've got. So once we get to the point, and here's one from the last drought that I did some work with a farmer, and he got to this level of the dam, excluded the stock from the dam rather than having them coming in and bogging it up, getting all the mud circulated and feces mixed in with it, pumped the water remaining from there into this header tank, and then that was gravity fed to a trough. So that saved him, he said it saved him about a month's to 6 weeks worth of carting water in for his cattle, and he got to utilise all of the water left in the dam by having that system. The other big factor was that when he paid for water to be delivered, it was going into a tank, and there wasn't any losses with evaporation. So something maybe to consider for people, and that can be done on any scale, small or large. The other thing, just a quick plug for checking and maintaining your dams. The last thing you want to do is have a dam and say, there's lots of water in there, I'm through, I'm going to be okay, and then this happens. And we get called to numerous ones of these in the summertime. And unfortunately, dams don't let go in the middle of winter when you've got plenty of water. They always let go in the summertime when you've got limited resources. So maintaining your dams is really, really important. Okay, so what are some of our options? We've done these sums, we've done the maths, and we find we've got a shortfall. No surprise here, and there isn't any silver bullets. We need to decrease stock and then make better use of that water for the ones remaining. You might be lucky enough to get some adjustment. That's pretty challenging at this point in time. When I say alter or change the farming system, what I'm saying is if you're currently got cows and calves, you might decide to wean early or sell calves early so that you're only looking after dry cows instead of cows and calves. You might elect to consolidate your water system in this day and age when we've got really good pumping systems, and I know people that have shifted water around 1,000-acre properties with 1.5-inch water, raw water from one dam to another, and so they've kept it all in their biggest and deepest dam. You might restrict access, do a water trough as I've mentioned before in that photos, and then you get into standpipes, carting water. Think outside the box. It might be your neighbour or someone like that you might be able to access, and as I've described is plumbing all of your roof into tanks so that if we do get a rainfall event, you're going to at least have some water. Long-term planning, and what do we need to be looking at? Well, first of all, we need to be looking at how do we improve and increase our storage capacity. For some people, that's cleaning out your dams, and lots of that's been done. If we're going to increase the size of our dams, you can't just go and do that. Sometimes that may need a planning permit, and certainly contact with the local water authorities to make sure that you're not going outside the regulations under a stock and domestic system. But that's certainly something for people. We need to be looking at the yield, so how much water is likely to fall in that dam and fill that dam. And that's what I mean by the paddock catchment. Consider what is growing above it so that we get some yield and the water runs into it. The other thing to look at is other water sources, bores. Desalination is coming onto the market, and there's desalination plants are becoming more and more affordable. So that saline water and water that we couldn't use previously now is becoming available. We've got things such as roaded catchments, so hard surfaces that give us a much better yield. There's lots of other things that we can look at in the planning and development stage to shore up your property and make them more drought-proof. And I guess the other one is water reticulation and making the most of that water and really using it smartly. Shade for stock is always a big one, and we know that they use less water if there is some shade. And the other one, on your place is recycling, actually an option for you. Some people are looking into it, but maybe something to consider. The other one is evaporation, and very few farmers have got into this space at this stage in terms of really decreasing their evaporation, seepage and wind, but I think that's something that we're going to have to really give consideration to, given the amount of losses that are incurred through evaporation. So the key messages from today is we need to calculate how much water your business is actually using and how much you require. So if it's a few litres, we actually need to know that it's 0.8 of a megalitre or it's 1.2 megalitres, and then we can do some real science and some real maths behind those things. Calculate what your current farm water supply is. Consider the options to ensure your livestock have sufficient good quality water, and that's a really important one, is that they do need good quality water. And then we need to plan for the future, so we're hopefully not in this situation the next dry spell. Once again, I'm more than happy, and I've been in this space for a lot of years and gone through 206 and 20, lots of droughts, and helped lots of farmers, so more than happy to have a one phone call and just talk about some of these things with you. Okay, here's some of the resources that are available to people. The one that I'm highlighting with the red is the online calculator, and the other ones are Managing Farm Water Supplies booklet, drought feeding, and some ag notes, and they're all available on our website. And if you can't find them, give me a ring or send me an email, and I can shoot them out to you in a hard copy, because some people prefer it like that. Okay, we're time for questions, and thanks very Brad. I'll hand back over to Brad Costin, who will finish this up. The next slide is my contact details and Brad's contact details. So if you've got any questions or any thoughts, please feel free to pass them on to us.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, Greg is very approachable, so feel free to definitely chase him up if you've got some tricky questions on that. So now I was thinking we would open up for some questions if people have got them. And yeah, we've got a question coming through, and you can type a question down there on the left-hand side of the message panel. And if you have a message you'd like to deliver through the phone, you can push *1, and our support will open up a line, and you'll be able to answer that question. And so what we'll do, we'll just make a start on the questions there, Greg. So there's a question there about dams with blue-green algae, and is there anything you can do to make it safe for stock?
Short answer so the question there is about blue-green algae, and if it's been determined that it is blue-green algae, okay, and there's lots of other things that it can be, so you need to get it sent off and tested first, but the short answer is no. If it's blue-green algae, you need to exclude stock from it. It's got a life cycle. It's generally caused by lower volumes of water, increased water temperatures, and soil and water nutrient. So yes, there's nothing magical you can throw in there to then make it perfectly safe for stock. Would be my thoughts there. Next, Brad.
All right. So let's have a look. Ooh, we might have another question. Yep. How do we tell if it's blue-green algae or something like that?
The way to tell if it is blue-green algae is to send it away to a water laboratory and with a specific question of, is this blue-green algae? And they will give you a determination on that. And we have a fact sheet on blue-green algae that's available on that web source. Or if you can't find it, give me a bell. I've got them printed out sitting on my desk.
What are the options for reducing evaporation?
Okay, we've got a question here. What are the options for reducing evaporation in dams? So there's been quite a lot of work done in this space over the last 20 years, and some of them have been successful and some of them haven't been. The biggest issue, and I've worked with farmers over the last 15 years in this space, is the amount of time to do it. And there's some surfactants that have been applied to the surface areas of dams to minimise evaporation that way, but they need to be applied every week to 2 weeks. There's also some discs that they had out, and you could throw them out on a dam, and they reduced the evaporation. But once again, the time involved and the management of those things for farmers, they didn't see the need, so that wasn't done. So they haven't been as successful. They're used for some small market gardens and some industries, but I'd have to say it's not something that's been successful over generally large bodies of water.
Okay. If there isn't any other questions, I know we've still got other one here from a listener.
So the next question we have here is, do trees around dams decrease evaporation or increase loss through transpiration? Really good one. Trees that are around dams and that decrease the wind velocity across the water certainly help with reduced evaporation. So people are starting to plant their trees instead of right next to the dam where they're using that water. They're putting them 10, 50, 20, 30 metres away, so they're reducing the airflow and the velocity of wind across the dam, and that does have a factor in reducing evaporation. The question here is, and just my apologies while I read this. All right, so this is really, and this is exactly what I was talking about, no two farms are the same. It's about cattle have access to 2 dams where the water doesn't look good. It smells and actually stinks, yet they are around the dam and ignoring a trough with, to me, very good water in it. What can I do? Okay. So really the only thing to do is, if you don't want them in the dam, is to exclude them from that, and that means need to fence it. And you can do that temporary with electric fencing. But if it is good quality water in the trough, I'm surprised that they're actually not drinking it. They may be going and standing in the dam from a cooling sensation, but most stock will walk past the dam to go and drink good clean water out of a trough. Happy if you give us a bell to follow that one up.
Okay, Brad here. So I think what I'll do is I'll hand back over to our webinar support, and from here, and they might also be able to help with any technical questions or getting people to put their question up.
Thank you. To ask a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad and wait for your name to be announced. We'll now pause a moment to assemble a question queue. At this moment, we have no further questions. I'll hand back now for any additional or closing remarks.
Okay, so we just made available if people were just on the voice on the phone to ask any questions, and nobody wanted to take that one up. We've just had one more come in on the online, and this is probably more a comment. We have spring-fed dams that have always in the past seen us through. However, this year none of our dams are full and springs have yet to run. Okay, and there's a really good point that if you're relying on some type of water system and this person potentially is not going to get that water, what does that mean to your farming business or to your animals? And I guess from an Agriculture Victoria perspective is you not having water is your responsibility, and relying on rainfall or your springs to run means your animals may or may not have water. So it's your responsibility to come up with a different system. And it's going to be very challenging, and that may apply to some other people as well. Okay, I'd like to say thanks very much to the people that logged on and listened in. Hopefully you got some insights. Once again, more than happy to walk people through the systems and the process and the maths if you so need it. Okay, thank you very much. I'll hand over to Brad.
Alrighty, thanks everyone for those questions. I'd just like to thank Greg for presenting today. And so just remember, if you did miss out on asking a question or you think it's easier to speak in person, Greg's very approachable. So make sure you chase him up. And you can also type in on an internet search Agriculture Victoria dry season conditions to get some more information on that. Now, also, I just can I ask if you could stay online for just a couple more minutes, just so we can ask some evaluation questions about today's seminar. And if you could stick around and answer them, we'd really appreciate that. It really helps sort of tailor future sessions and the services that we that we have. So I'm going to have to hand you back over to our webinar support, and they'll guide you through how to answer the questions. That'd be great. So I'll hand you back over, and they'll be able to walk you through the questions.
Thank you. We will now begin the polling segment. For those on the webinar platform, please submit your responses via the survey form that has appeared on your screen now. For those on the teleconference, please listen carefully to the following instructions. I will read out all 4 questions and possible responses. Once the 4th polling question has been read out, please stand by on the telephone until an operator has collected your response. Question 1. How satisfied were you with this event? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1, very dissatisfied, 5, neutral, 10, very satisfied. Question 2. After listening to this webinar, has your confidence level to make farm water decisions in dry seasonal conditions increased? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1, strongly disagree, 5, neutral, 10, strongly agree. 3, would you recommend this type of event to others? Response 1, yes. Response 2, no. Question 4, are you interested in a tutorial on the web-based farm water calculator? Response 1, yes. Response 2, no. If yes, please provide your contact details for a follow-up. We will now wait for a few moments to collect the teleconference participants' responses. I'll hand back now to Brad for any additional closing remarks.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, thanks everyone for participating. And certainly encourage you if you've got any questions that might be a bit trickier or a bit more in depth. That Greg is happy to field those ones and just chase his details up there. So, look, with that, I'll finish the webinar and thank everyone for participating. Thank you.
That concludes the Managing Your Dam Water Supply in Dry Seasonal Conditions webinar. Thank you once again for joining us today. You may all disconnect.